You're about to listen to the Dr. Daliah Show. Sassy, stimulating medical talk radio. Any medical advice Dr. Daliah Wax gives on her show should not be substituted for an actual visit to your medical provider. And now, here's Dr. Daliah.
All right. We are back on the Dr. Daliah Show. Thank you all for tuning in. 1-877 Dr. Daliah, 1-877-DOCDALI. So have any of you been involved in an emergency landing and survived, obviously? And then when you had to land at another airport, just get back on the plane going, all right, we're good. Whew, dodged a bullet on that one. Let's get back in the air. Have any of you guys been in that situation? And did you get right back into the air? Or did you say, you know what, I think I'm going to take a breather. I'm going to have a couple drinks. Not that the doctor's recommending that. But was that your state of mind, saying, you know what, I think I'm going to sit this one out and maybe try again another day? 1-877-DOC-DALI, 1-877-DOCDALI. Looks like we had another emergency landing after some horrific turbulence that affected a Delta flight. Passengers aboard a Delta flight from Salt Lake City to Amsterdam had plummeted 1,500 feet and had to make an emergency landing. This was Delta Flight 56 and had to be diverted to Minneapolis, St. Paul at about 5:30 p.m. Wednesday, 2 hours into its 8-hour flight. Why? Delta confirmed it was severe turbulence that rocked the aircraft. People were thrown into the air, beverage carts crashing around the cabin. And you see that the plane actually plummeted over 1,600 feet in an 85-second span. Passengers said there was a moment where they thought they were all going down. How horrifying. The flight then continued for over an hour, and then they landed in Minneapolis. So you see pictures of it, drinks and everything going by, and you know, usually the pilots are really, really good. I'm blown away at how they can handle, turbulence. We'll talk about turbulence in a second. I live in Las Vegas, Nevada. And so when you fly in the summer or the heat, the turbulence really shakes you, especially on ascent. But, most of the time when I'm flying, they say, keep your seatbelt on, keep your seatbelt on. I'm like, well, I have to pee. They're like, all right, but the pilot has the fastest seatbelt sign on. I notice most of the time the pilots have the fastest seatbelt sign on the whole flight. I don't blame them for that. But apparently this was one of those times where they said if you need to get up and go around the cabin and move around the cabin, you can. You could use a restroom. But then when you sit back in your seat, get your seatbelt on. Well, apparently some people had their seatbelts off and were flown around the plane. I think 25 people had to end up going to the hospital. So the fact that the beverage carts were out, because usually the beverage carts are locked into the crew hall, the fact that those were out means they thought it was a more, shall we say, mild air atmosphere. So why did this happen, and why did it happen so abruptly? So turbulence in a nutshell are these air movements in the atmosphere that are not necessarily even. And so if you're flying around, you get rocked around in it. Not necessarily like a rip current in water, but there's some instability in terms of the air. It could be from jet streams. It could be from weather, although we were told there really wasn't a weather issue. They flew around any weather if there was. Could be when there's like fronts of cold or warm air creating unstable air conditions. Sometimes if you're flying closer to mountains, there could be more turbulence. I think Denver has a lot of turbulence just because of the mountains and the Rockies nearby. Buildings could also do it, although you really shouldn't be flying too low. However, on ascent, when you are kind of leaving the airport and leaving the city, there'll be buildings. Sometimes if the aircraft can't stabilize as well, sometimes there could be mechanical issues, although I really look at turbulence as being an external issue as opposed to an internal issue, but sometimes internal issue could also make you feel that way. And then big temperature differences and high winds. So, seeing something like this was pretty scary. And 25 people taken to the hospital. There was an emergency landing. Some people had broken legs, fractured ribs. And when people read this and hear about it, they're like, okay, why isn't anybody in their seat with their seatbelt? Well, I got to tell you, if you are on a flight to Amsterdam and it's an 8-hour flight, well, then, you're You're going to get a blood clot if you don't kind of get up and move and stay active. My butt will get sore. I'll get some numbness. My sciatica might act up. I don't know. And so I need to get up. I do need to stand up and move around. And, turbulence is very frightening. If you've ever felt those drops, you just feel like you don't have control. God bless our pilots. Our pilots are absolutely fantastic, and they train in that. I know sometimes, I'll check out the pilots, see if they're cute, make sure they're sober. And then you'll see one who's really young, but then you'll always see one who's a little older. And so there's always like a senior versus a junior. But these pilots are very well trained. Thank God this didn't end in anything that could be more dangerous. Now, there are a list of airports that seem to have some major issues. So the most turbulent airports, if you want to avoid that, Denver International Airport, as we talked about with the mountains, hands down. Vancouver Airport, Prince George, Calgary, Quebec. Let me see, Las Vegas, Nevada. They call it the Harry Reid Airport. There's a lot of kind of controversy over that, but the Harry Reid Airport, because we like to call it the Las Vegas Airport, but we have other cities. That gets a lot of turbulence. That ranks high. Utah, Salt Lake, Northern Nevada, Reno. Reno Airport has apparently a lot of turbulence. Portland, and then Seattle. So these are some of the most turbulent airports in the United States. That's kind of interesting that Reno would also have it. But then again, you have the Sierra Nevadas, and the mountains could attribute to it. So back to that question. You have an emergency landing. You're being told that we're going to land, regroup, get off the aircraft. Do you go on the next one? Now, when you look at the statistics, knock on wood, thank God, most people that have had an emergency landing make it to their destination, right? The next plane or getting back in the air is fine. But how about mentally? Now, do you say, you know what, I think I want to just pray on this one. I want to think this through. I want to make sure the trip is meant to be. Personally, I would get on the plane because usually when I need to go somewhere, I need to get somewhere. And I usually cut it so close because I don't give myself a lot of leeway. But it's, thank God this didn't turn into a worse tragedy. 1-877 Doc Daliah.
Have you ever thought you'd like to buy and sell houses but didn't know how or where to get the money? My name is Ron LeGrand, and over the past 40 years, I've bought over 3,000 houses without using my money or credit and taught thousands to do the same. Today, even in a virtual environment, we buy nice houses in nice neighborhoods using no banks, realtors, contractors, or other costly entanglements, and build huge cash flow and wealth without the hassle of tenants, all without credit and little or no money. You don't need a license or experience, and I'll show you exactly how it's done. Text FREE to 99799, and I'll send you my free training. I promise you I'll change the way you think about real estate and open the door to a new lifestyle that doesn't involve risk or rehabs and can quickly replace your current income. Text FREE to 99799 and let me show you how to take your life back and build cash flow and wealth from your home. That's FREE to 99799. Again, FREE to 99799.
Hi guys, Dr. Daliah here. Addictions can sneak up on us and come in many forms. Whether it's drugs, alcohol, sex, video games, porn, or something less obvious such as food, internet, or shopping, addiction can seem innocent at first and then evolve into an insurmountable evil. In our book, Addiction Basics, Caitlin Kalikas and I dive into the common addictions and provide tips for identifying and preventing these before they sneak in and take over our lives. Addiction Basics can be found on Amazon or my website, drdaliah.com. Check it out.
Carl Amari here to tell you about our newest website for old-time radio lovers. It's 100radioshows.com. At this site, there are 5 old-time radio shows waiting for you to download free as our gift to you, and be sure to browse the additional 700 old-time radio shows available to you for 70% off by using the promo code RADIO at checkout. This is a limited-time offer, so log on to 100radioshows.com. That's 100radioshows.com.
you're back on the Dr. Daliah Show. Thank you all for tuning in. 1-877-DOC-DALI, 1-877-DOCDALI. Big thanks to Talk Media Network for making the show happen. Big thanks to Daniel, our producer, and big thanks to y'all for tuning in. We really do appreciate it. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter or X at Dr. Daliah, Facebook, The Dr. Daliah Show, and on YouTube, click like and subscribe. So, news broke, I guess, in the last 12 hours. Not the biggest headline. I'm not surprised that Kamala Harris is not going to be running for California governor. Whether Californians are breathing a sigh of relief or not, that's between you, California, and them. I don't live in California anymore. I care about what happens to California, but I think this is a smart move. One thing I like to do is talk about political strategy a lot on this show. Whether you're Republican or Democrat, I like to give advice to all sides because I think I see a lot of mess ups. And so I like to call it when I see it. And I think Kamala Harris running for California governor would have been a bad move. So I think it's smart that she did. Now, people think she's not going to run for governor because she does want to run for president in 2028. Currently, it's interesting. There's polls showing matchups, hypothetical matchups between Pete Buttigieg, who is a front runner for the Democratic Party, or Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, versus J.D. Vance, who would be most likely on the Republican ticket, either he or Marco Rubio. Most likely J.D. Vance, following Trump's presidency. And the J.D. Vance is leading Ocasio-Cortez and leading Pete Buttigieg. Not by much, but still leading. And so, for Kamala Harris, if she really does want to run for president, and apparently insiders are saying that's what her eyes are on, she's got like a tricky path. But, like I said, I love talking about political strategy. My background's in marketing and PR as well as medicine. And so, and psychology. So this is something that I think is fascinating. Kamala Harris was not popular in the Democratic primary, which is why Biden pushed ahead. Kamala Harris was one of the first ones out of the Democratic primary. So she does struggle in terms of popularity. Then while she was in Biden's office, critics of her cite, well, she was horrible at being a border czar. The border czar issue, like I said, that's a tricky one because if you made me border czar, all right, I would be on the first plane down to the border. I would be meeting with everybody, ICE, Customs, Border Patrol, everybody, getting a list of what they all need, coming back to Biden saying this is what they need, do it. And if they didn't, they all would have seen that I got the list and I would have said, look, I'm going to be passing this on. Okay, so if it doesn't work, it's not me. Problem is you can't do that. All right. If you are vice president, you can't show up the president. Now, whether she wanted to do the job or not, that's debatable. Did she really want to secure the border? Who knows? But, making Kamala Harris border czar, when I heard that happen, that was Biden's way of saying it's not going to get done. Because there is no way if Kamala Harris did what I would have done, and she come back saying, guys, here's the list. This is what they need. Let's get that wall built because they're asking for the wall. Let's get money appropriated. Let's help these guys out. Let's stop passing out Biden T-shirts, to people coming, let's tighten up, what we're doing in terms of preventing illegal immigrants from coming, but open up the pathway for legal immigration. She could have gotten, in front of the cameras. She could have done all of that. And she could have looked like a superstar. The problem is nobody lets their vice president outshine him, especially if they wanted open borders and they didn't want, the strictness of the border. So I can't give her that. And vice presidents always struggle. When you look at, George H.W. Bush, following, Ronald Reagan, he got in, but, this read my lips, no more taxes, or he's not raising taxes and all the other things. And, he was no Ronald Reagan. And so he didn't do that well. J.D. Vance, I see Trump is really, making sure J.D. Vance looks like he is a part of a lot of the decisions, a part of a lot of the meetings. They give him a lot of airtime because J.D. Vance has to be able to run on his own. And following Trump is a tough act to follow. So If people want to feel that J.D. Vance is going to continue to secure the border, work on the economy, get countries to invest in America, et cetera, and all the other stuff that people like Trump is doing, that are the Trump popular moves, J.D. Vance has to look like he's involved and he's on board. Although J.D. Vance has every right to have a personal campaign, so does Kamala Harris. So what does Kamala Harris need to do? Well, running for governor would be a mistake because if she lost, and we already know that she's not as popular. And whether it's a primary, whether it's an election, and the other thing too is she never, shall we say, she was never voted in to run. She never won a primary for this latest election. She just took the place of Biden. So nobody ever got to test how popular she is. If she runs for governor and fails miserably, her political career is over. So she now gets to buy a couple more years. So I think that's smart, right? She gets to buy a few more years. Now, she has to send the message and reverse that Sunny Hostin interview where on The View, they said, what would you do different than Biden? And she's like, I can't think of anything. That answer has to be completely changed. And she could say, look, I do not want to throw my boss under the bus. What Biden had when he entered office was a whole different landscape than I will. This is, let's say she's still running. And the answer she should have given back then was, look, what Biden had with his landscape is much different than what I will. If I win this election, am going to be in 2025 dealing with this, and this. So this is what I'm going to do. She could have very easily answered that question. But Kamala Harris's problem is she can't answer questions. Now, maybe she has good ideas, but we don't get to see them. And so when she's like, I can't think of any, or I don't have any at the top of my head, or whatever her answer was, it really sunk her. And so get some answers. You've had plenty of time. And say, look, this is how the Republicans do things. This is how the Democrats do things. But we listen to the American people. And when you look, they don't like extremes. They like common sense. And so I am going to work with the Republicans on X, Y, and Z. But my way, or the Democratic way, will include this. Now, and so I think she can send messaging. It's just, she has to separate from the Biden-Harris administration. And unfortunately, during her campaign, she didn't. Now, people could say, look, once she said it, she's screwed. Well, look at Zohran Mamdani. I mean, he was so anti-NYPD. He was so anti-police. And now he's, at the funeral of Officer Islam and saying he's holding his father in his hands. The father had a stroke after he found out his son was shot from that shooter in Manhattan over the weekend. And so now he's acting like he's pro-police. And the funny thing is there are voters out there that will believe that. They won't go back and care about previous tweets. So Kamala Harris, if she does have an audience that has a low attention span and will not remember some of the things she says or think that she is going to turn over a new leaf, she has some potential. Now, why would she have potential? With the failed campaign and the lack of popularity, because Ocasio-Cortez is not a favorite. Ocasio-Cortez gets a lot of media attention, but unfortunately, a lot of moderate Democrats don't like her. Pete Buttigieg, really good in terms of his personality. Pete Buttigieg, very good in terms of his popularity. But again, as Department of Transportation, did people get a real good look at what he could do to run the country? Is he able to run the country? Does he have that shall we say, that does, he definitely contrasts from Biden a lot, especially with his youth and his energy. But, what does he do in terms of national security? How does he feel on immigration, et cetera? Kamala Harris, might actually, even though from what I understand in the polls right now, she's leading behind them, she does have an opportunity if she changes her messaging, but she's going to have to change her messaging a lot. Running for governor, big mistake, because I think she would lose the California governorship. I think in California, they're kind of mixed between, did what Gavin Newsom do? Was it good? Was it bad? Do we need a change? Are we going too far? Extreme? Now we have homeless individuals, but benefits are being given to illegal immigrants when we haven't helped our homeless veterans that are on the street. California's going through a lot. Not to mention the Pacific Palisades fire showed that the state is not being run properly. God bless our first responders, but the fact that the water tables and the fire hydrants and all that other stuff, for her to have to look like she's the cleanup person, I don't think that's a good look for her. So we'll see, but that's my thoughts. Those are my thoughts. 1-877 Doc Daliah.
Looking for a gift that can actually help secure someone's future? It's Mark Falter's new book, Common Sense Income Strategies. It makes the perfect gift for that special someone in your life. Mark has helped thousands of hardworking Americans secure their financial future by using time-tested strategies that continue to create wealth, whether the market is up or down. Strategies that will make perfect sense once you take the time to read this powerful book. Common Sense Income Strategies brings to you what Mark has been teaching in person and talking about on the radio for decades. You've worked too long and too hard not to see the fruits of your labor. To learn how to receive your free copy, call 866-764-2635. That's 866-764-2635. Secure your future with Common Sense Income Strategies by Mark Falter. Again, to learn how to receive your free copy, call 866-764-2635. That's 866-764-2635.
We are back on the Dr. Daliah Show. Thank you all for tuning in. 1-877 Dr. Daliah, 1-877 DOCDALI. So, our hearts, right? Probably one of the most important organs in the body next to the brain. Actually, I equate them both. Can't do anything without your brain. You can't do anything without your heart. You really need them. And the age at which our heart ages is not linear. As we've talked about, our aging is not for every 1 second in time you get 1 second older. Maybe we do that chronologically, but biologically, we put on a lot of miles. I put on a lot of miles. For my age, I think I've gone through a lot. I've definitely put on a lot of miles in terms of stress. The stress in my family has just grown exponentially, and I got to figure out how to protect my heart. And we talk about how to protect your heart. One, identify your cardiac risk factors. And then two, if you do have cardiac risk factors, address them. Well, apparently there's a calculator, and I'll talk about the risk factors, but I want to talk about this calculator, where cardiologists publish in the Journal of American Medical Association Cardiology Research Letter a heart age calculator that can help predict your cardiac future, looking at your age, your sex, your cholesterol, your blood pressure, your eGFR, which is your glomerular filtration rate. It's a marker of your kidney health. Very important. Diabetes, smoking. If you're on statins, high blood pressure medication, looking at that model and then helping determine your heart health. When the new risk calculator, according to Stat News, was applied to 14,000 Americans in a long-running national health survey who were 30 to 79 years old, it said more than half of adults had hearts older than their chronological age, with wider gaps on average for some groups. Women had a heart age of 55.4 compared to their age of 51.3. For men, their heart age was 56.7 compared to a chronological age of 49.7. If you had a high school education or less, it added 10 years to heart age. Black men's heart age was 8.5 years older than their actual age. The gap was 7.9 years older for Hispanic men, 6.7 years older for Asian men, 6.4 years older for white men. Black women's hearts were 6.2 years older, Hispanic women 4.8 years older, white women 3.7 years older, Asian women 2.8 years older. So Asian women did better than white women white men did better than their Asian, Hispanic, black men counterparts. And we shouldn't have such a disparity. But in medicine, we do. And in biology and physiology, sadly, we do as well. So this calculator, I think is nice. What I like about these calculators is for those people that don't think they have a problem and they're walking around with their head in the clouds, it reminds them, whoa, something's up. On the other end, if you sit and play around with your calculator saying, well, look, I don't go to the doctor and I have never been diagnosed with high blood pressure or diabetes or cholesterol, so I'm good. Well, how do you know? My father said he was healthy until the day he died. And then he died of a massive heart attack. Oh, my blood pressure good, cholesterol good, diabetes good, leave me alone. Leave me alone. And I had to leave him alone. He wouldn't let me talk to him about it. Well, unfortunately, his heart didn't leave him alone, and he's gone. So when we look at our hearts, what is the big deal about a chronological age versus your biological age? Well, let's say I'm 29. Okay. If my body is acting like a 40 or 50-year-old and I'm 29, I'm not going to live that long. It really matters what your biological age is. That's why we see individuals, like look at Clint Eastwood in his 90s. His biological age is probably younger than his chronological age for him to do as well as he has. And those are pretty significant. So we talked about heart attacks. Heart attacks or myocardial infarction is where there's a lack of blood flow to a portion of the muscle. If the muscle in the heart doesn't get the blood flow, it's not going to function properly. If it's not going to function properly, the electricity isn't going to move through it to cause it to pump, or the muscle won't move to pump. You could then go into cardiac arrest. Heart attacks or myocardial infarctions happen when you lose blood flow, either by a cholesterol plaque building up or a piece of it breaking off, forming a clot. When it forms a clot, that's where it blocks blood flow. Platelets try to go to help protect the blood vessel lining that might have torn, and then the more platelets and clot formed, the faster your chance to have a heart attack. And so we need to, one, make sure that your heart muscle is safe, the electricity is moving through your heart. Sometimes cardiac arrest happens not because of a blood flow issue, but because of an electrical issue. So we want to make sure that your heart is conducting electricity well. Well, if you've had heart attacks and the muscle is not conducting the electricity, that's going to be a problem. And if your heart can't pump, it can't work. So if you do have a heart attack, we immediately give you oxygen because that's what's going to be missing for your tissues if there's not enough oxygen. So we want to oxygenate as much as we possibly can. Aspirin to help decrease the clotting factors will lower your blood pressure. Blood thinners, vasodilators to help open up the blood vessels to try to get blood flowing to the body. Pain reduction, because if you're in pain, you're going to tighten up. So we try to give you something to help relieve the pain. We'll lower your cholesterol. And then we might have to remove the clot by surgery or angioplasty. Signs of a heart attack could be chest pain, shortness of breath, dizziness. If you are feeling fine when you're sitting, but you get up and you notice you're more winded, that could be a sign of a heart attack. Syncope, passing out, arm pain, shoulder pain, neck pain, back pain, jaw pain. If your jaw starts to hurt and you don't have bad teeth, that could be a sign of a heart attack. Sweating, nausea, vomiting. And sometimes a heart attack is silent. So what are the risk factors? Well, you need to know and be aware. If there's a family history of heart disease, you have a risk factor. I do. My dad had a heart attack. Now, if you have a personal history of heart disease, that's also a risk factor. Thank God I don't. If you have high blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes, thank God I don't, but I watch, because if I don't go in and get seen and get checked out, how do I know? If you smoke, that's a huge risk factor. If you're obese, if you're inactive, if you're a male over 40, if you're a female who's postmenopausal, you're at higher risk. If you have high stress, even short stature has been cited as a potential risk factor. So reducing your risk is crucial. You got to maintain a normal blood pressure, even if it's with medication that your doctor prescribes. Maintain normal blood sugar because diabetes really accelerates heart attacks. artery clogging and arteriosclerosis. Maintain cholesterol, lipid levels, fat levels through diet, exercise, and medication. Reduce your stress. Now, we've talked about this. That's easier said than done. But unfortunately, with family issues or in-law issues or work issues or money issues or health issues, stress is tough. But find a way to reduce it because stress will take time off your heart health. Balanced diet, rich in potassium-rich foods like fruits and vegetables. Don't smoke. Don't vape. Cut the marijuana. Just try to be as clean and healthy as possible. Stay active and try and maintain a healthy body weight. But also enjoy life. I think love helps. There's been studies showing if you're a pet owner, people have better heart health. Now, maybe it's because you have to take them, for a walk. Or you have to clean their poo-poo boxes and things like that. But I got to tell you, though, when you lose a pet, boy, that is tough. But the years of love and happiness you have, I think, outweigh that risk. So I'm for having a pet. I think pets have what has kept me young and kept me healthy. They say transgender men are at higher risk of cardiovascular disease. So they looked at individuals who were assigned female at birth and then transitioned. Because of the hormones, that could possibly put people at higher risk. So even if you're biologically male or female, but you are transitioning, understand that could also affect your risk, depending on the hormones you take. 1-877 Doc Daliah.
Hey guys, it's Clyde. We've had a lot of requests for Ground Zero merchandise, so we put together an online store with a big variety of high-quality items. I'm really excited to let you know about these things. We have a lot to offer you and your loved ones. In addition to our regular apparel, such as t-shirts, beanies, hoodies, and hats, we've expanded our product line with posters, flags, aprons, mugs, and a whole lot more. We also have Ground Zero collectibles along with a limited edition of items like a Clyde Lewis canvas portrait, a Ground Zero embroidered jacket that will certainly make for great gifts and for interesting conversations with family and friends. And we now offer publications such as Ron Patton's book about mind control, MK Zine, and back copies of the official magazine of Ground Zero while it was in print. Paranoia, the Conspiracy Reader, also coming in 2023, are updated and revised books that I've written. There's a secure and easy-to-use shopping cart for your purchases. So shop today at our official store by going to groundzeromerch.com. Again, that's groundzeromerch.com.
Dr. Daliah here. Are you tired, burned out, gaining weight, succumbing to the daily pressures of life? Well, how's your dopamine doing? How you feel right now, how you'll feel an hour from now, and how you'll feel next week is completely reliant on your dopamine. Our daily motivation and willingness to push through challenges depends on the intricate chemical process dopamine provides. Christian Kalikas and I created Deploying Dopamine, a book that tells you what dopamine is, when it dysfunctions, and how to successfully deploy it when needed. Find Deploying Dopamine on Amazon today. Check it out.
Lisa Wolf here to tell you about our newest website for old-time radio lovers. It's 100radioshows.com. At this site, there are 5 old-time radio shows waiting for you to download free as our gift to you. And be sure to browse the additional 700 old-time radio shows available to you for 70% off by using the promo code RADIO at checkout. This is a limited-time offer, so log on to 100radioshows.com. That's 100radioshows.com.
All right. So we are back on the Dr. Daliah Show. Thank you all for tuning in. 1-877 Doc Daliah, 1-877 DOCDALI. So, this is I've been watching this Clarkson's Farm TV show. Right? My father-in-law got us onto it, where Jeremy Clarkson, who I believe was, I didn't really watch a lot of TV in the 90s or 2000s, but I think he was the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. I've seen him before. I just haven't really followed his career. Well, apparently, Jeremy Clarkson bought a farm. And he buys a farm, and he walks you through the trials and tribulations of farming. Now, even though he's a millionaire or billionaire, you forget that temporarily, and you see the costs of everything, the seed, the trying to plow, the tractor fees, the staff, what happens when there's inclement weather, when there's no rain and there's a drought, the crops are screwed. When it rains, it floods. And you look at how these farmers are trying to make a profit, and you wonder how they do it. And the show had started right before COVID, and I think it's been in 4 seasons. I'm on the 4th season now. And it kind of went through how there were subsidies before Brexit. Then Brexit comes, and subsidies for farmers started to be in peril and up in the air. Then they call them schemes, even though in America we think scheme is a negative. In the UK, a scheme is like a kind of like a plan, or like a plan, a scheme. That's just the way something is being done. And so there's these ways where farmers can get subsidies if they show they are doing environmental farming, protecting their environment, using part of their farmland to help improve climate change, things like that. So you see him do that. You also see what happens when illness affects some of the animals, whether it's cattle, whether it's pigs. And I guess in a couple seasons, they were talking about tuberculosis and how tuberculosis can spread so quickly on a farm that the animals have to be culled or put down. Well, apparently in the news, Jeremy Clarkson has announced that his farm has, quote, gone down with TB. He said everyone at his diddly squat farm in Chadlington, Oxfordshire, is absolutely devastated. There was an infected cow that's pregnant with twins. And the cattle, if a cattle fails a TB test or have inconclusive test results for 2 results, are classified as reactors and then have to be taken to slaughter. Now, TB is transmitted, through people, respiratory droplets, breathing, nose, skin contact. For animals, it could also, go through saliva, urine, feces, and milk. And so cattle coming, exposed to other cattle, unfortunately, is a problem. And so, when you watch these, and so that was a headline today, and so I wanted to talk about it really quickly. But when one thing that's really interesting is he not only talks about, farm life, but he also a very interesting business mind. And I've been kind of captivated by the show because I love his business mind of it as well. And one of the things he's doing in season 4 is looking at getting a pub. And he talks about how, the village is changing. Rather than there being a village school, a village shop, a village pub, people go up the road or they go, to where the school district goes, or where the job is, and the village is starting to fall apart. And one thing that really kept the character of Europe, and it used to in America, was the village pub, where you would go to this corner pub after work, like Cheers. That's why I love the show Cheers. Where after work you would come in, have a drink, have a beer, whatever, and talk to people, whether they were random or not. And that sort of camaraderie and that stress reliever, I think, is very important. Now, we don't really have a lot of village pubs. Some of you live in small town, and there's a watering hole that you all go to, and that's great. That's great. Keep that, for the love of the Lord. I hope that always can remain. But there's not really a lot of that sort of incentive for those places to exist anymore. In fact, a lot of the pubs in Europe apparently are going under, according to Jeremy Clarkson. And I think, when we talk about heart health and stress, you have a stressful day or you're worried about what's going on in your life. When you get to talk to others, it helps. This is why when we were medical students, they made us all go to AA, not because we had an alcohol problem, but they wanted us to learn what happens in AA. And we went and we're like, oh my gosh, I wish I could go here all the time, even though I didn't drink. The reason why is when you hear what other people go through, it starts to put a different perspective on your life. You could have a pity party and feel sorry for yourself. When you see what else is going on, you're like, oh, okay, maybe I do have it good. Maybe I am going to go home and kiss my wife because she's not as bad as I thought she was. And so this idea of the village pub, I think really needs to come back. Now, not that I want to promote drinking, but where you walk in, there's people there, you sit at a stool, and you listen in or you become a part of the conversation. But that's not what's happening. When you walk into a place, everybody's kind of doing their own thing. They have their own little corner. They have their own little, I'll sometimes talk to others. See, when you're younger, you do this. You're at a bar or you're at a club, and then everybody just starts hanging out and talking to others. But now it's getting different, especially since there's so many crimes and so many people with mental illness. People like to stick to themselves, saying, don't come into our circle. We don't trust you. We don't know who you are. And even though I understand that that's justified, because there are some crazy people out there, what about those individuals who don't have a group? All they do is work and go home. Church was fantastic for that. You go to church, temple, your mosque, whatever, and there would be a family. Unfortunately, it's getting expensive to go. The dues, or the distance to one. Cities used to plan where you had to have that access to a church or a house of worship, every few miles. A lot of people they don't feel they have that. So I like the idea, if you don't have, clergy or a house of worship that you feel comfortable going to, there's a place where you could go to. You sit up at the bar, you're watching the game, and if there is a conversation, you get to join it. Now, small towns are much better at doing this than big cities because small towns, everybody knows each other. So it's not like you're just talking to strangers. You're like, hey, Bob, how's your crop doing? Oh, same old, same old. People have things in common. That's what Jeremy Clarkson wants to do. He wants to build a pub where farmers get to kind of hang out and talk and share ideas. But it really helps. It's funny, these medical conferences, people always ask me, Daliah, how do you go to these medical conferences and not fall asleep? Well, one is I do find the material interesting. Okay, sorry, call me a nerd, but I do like, the medical content. But another reason is it really helps to be around people in your field and understand the trials and tribulations they're going to. I see doctors out of jobs. I see doctors who, don't feel like they get to do the medicine they want to. There's doctors that can't stand corporate medicine. And you start to get to, you get a feel for, well, wait a second. We're not alone. 1-877-DOC-DOLLY. Don't go away.
Looking for an easy read that can actually help secure someone's future? Pick up a copy of Mark Falter's book, Common Sense Income Strategies. For the past 30-plus years, Mark has helped thousands of hardworking Americans secure their financial future by using strategies that continue to create wealth, whether the market is up or down. Strategies that will make perfect sense once you take the time to read this powerful book. Common Sense Income Strategies brings to you what Mark has been teaching in person and talking about on the radio for decades. It's not rocket science, it's a pretty easy read. You've worked too long and too hard not to see the fruits of your labor. Common Sense Income Strategies is available now on Amazon or by calling 866-764-2635. That's 866-764-2635. Common Sense Income Strategies by Financial Fitness Show host Mark Falter. Secure your financial future today.